Camp Harmony, 1942, page 147. Henry pretended he was sick the next day, even refusing to eat. But he knew he could fool his mother only so long, if he was fooling her at all. He probably wasn't. She was just kind enough to go along with his manufactured symptoms, as well as the excuse he'd employed to explain why his black eye and bruised cheek courtesy of Chaz. Henry had told her they were from bumping into someone in the crowded streets. He hadn't elaborated further. The ruse was effected only if his mother was a willing accomplice, and he didn't want to push his luck. So on Thursday, Henry did what he'd been dreading all week. He started preparing to go back to school, back to Mrs. Walker's sixth grade class, alone. At the breakfast table, Henry's mother didn't ask if he was feeling better. She knew. His father ate a bowl of juk and read the newspaper, fretting over a string of Japanese victories at Baton, Burma, and the Solomon Islands. Henry stared at him but didn't say a word. Even if he'd been allowed to speak to his father in Cantonese, he wouldn't have said a thing. He wanted to blame him for Keiko's family being taken away, to blame him for doing nothing. But in the end, he didn't know what to blame him for not caring? How could he blame his own father when no one else seemed to care either? His father must have felt his stare. He set his newspaper down and looked at Henry, who stared back, not blinking. "I have something for you." His father reached into his shirt pocket and drew out a button. This one read, "I'm an American," in red, white, and blue block lettering. He handed it to Henry, who glared and refused to take it. His father calmly set the new button on the table. "Your father wants you to wear this. Better now that the Japanese are being evacuated from Seattle," his mother said, dishing up a bowl of the sticky, plain-tasting rice soup, placing it hot and steaming in front of Henry. There was that word again, evacuated. Even when his mother said it in Cantonese, it didn't make sense. Evacuated from what? Keiko had been taken from him. Henry snatched the button in his fist and grabbed his book bag, storming out the door. He left the steaming bowl of soup untouched. He didn't even say goodbye. On the way to school, the other kids heading to the Chinese school didn't tease him as they walked by. The look on his face must have carried a warning. Or maybe they too were shocked into silence by the empty, boarded-up buildings of Nihonmachi a few blocks over. A few blocks from home, Henry found the nearest trash can and threw his new button on the heap of overflowing garbage, broken bottles that wouldn't be recycled for the war effort, and hand-painted signs that 48 hours earlier would held up by the cheering crowds in favor of the evacuation. At school that day, Mrs. Walker was absent, so they had a substitute, Mr. Deakins. The other kids seemed too preoccupied with how much they could get away with as the new teacher stumbled through the day's assignments and left Henry alone in the back of the classroom. He felt as if he might disappear, and maybe he had. No one called on him, no one said a word, and he was grateful. The cafeteria, though, was an entirely different affair. Mrs. Beatty seemed genuinely annoyed that Keiko was gone. Henry wasn't sure if her disappointment was because of the unjust circumstances of his friend's sudden departure or simply because the lunch lady had no help out more with the kitchen cleanup. She cursed under her breath as she brought out the last pan of the day's lunch meat, calling it chicken katsuretsu. Henry wasn't sure what that meant, but it looked like Japanese food. American Japanese food, anyway. Breaded chicken cutlets and a brown gravy. Lunch actually looked good. Smelled good, too. "Let 'em try that. See what they have to say about it," was all she grumbled before she wandered off with her cigarettes. If Henry's fellow grade schoolers knew that the main course at lunch was Japanese food, they didn't notice and didn't seem to mind. But the irony hit Henry like a hammer. He smiled, realizing there was more to Mrs. Beatty than met the eye. The other kids, though, they weren't full of such surprises. "Look, they forgot one," a group of fourth graders taunted as he dished their lunches. "Someone called the army. One got away." Henry didn't have his button, not the old one or the new one. Neither would have mattered. How many more days, he thought. Sheldon said the war wouldn't go on forever. How many more days of this do I have to put up with? Like a prayer being answered by a cruel and vengeful God, Chaz appeared, sliding his tray in front of Henry. "They take your girlfriend away, Henry? Maybe now you'll learn not to fratten, not to hang out with the enemy. Dirty backstabbing Jap. She probably was poisoning our food." Henry scooped up a heaping spoonful of chicken and gravy, cocking his arm, eyeing Chaz's bony ape-like forehead. That was when he felt thick sausage fingers wrap around his forearm, holding him back. He looked up and Mrs. Beatty was standing behind him. She took the serving spoon from his hand and eyeballed Chaz. "Beat it." "There's not enough food left," she said. "What do you mean? There's plenty. Kitchen's closed to you today. Scram." Henry looked up and saw what he could only describe as Mrs. Beatty's war face, a hard look like the one you'd seen in those movie-tone newsreels of soldiers in training, that stony expression of someone whose occupation is killing and maiming. Chaz looked like a puppy that had been caught making a mess and had just had his nose rubbed in it, sleeking off with an empty tray, shoving little kids out of the way. I never liked him anyways, Miss Beatty said. And as Henry went back to serving the last few kids in line, who looked delighted to see the school bully taken down a peg. You want to make some money Saturday? The stout lunch lady asked. Who, me? Henry asked. Yeah, you. You got other work you got to do on Saturday? Henry shook his head no, partly confused and scared of the tank-like woman who had just left tread marks on the seat of Chaz's dungarees. I've been asked to help set up the mess hall as a civilian contractor for the Army, and I could use someone that works hard and knows how I like things done. She looked at Henry, who wasn't sure what he was hearing. You got a problem with that? No, he said, and he didn't. She cooked, Henry set up and served, he broke down and cleaned. It was hard work, but he was used to it. And as hard as she made him work here in the school kitchen, she had never said a mean word to Henry. Of course, she'd never said a kind word either. Good. Meet me here at 9 o'clock Saturday morning, and don't be late. I can pay you 10 cents an hour. Money was money, Henry thought, still stunned from seeing Chaz walk away with his tail between his legs. Where are we going to work? Camp Harmony. It's at the Puyallup Fairgrounds near Tacoma. I've got a feeling you've heard of it. She stared at Henry, her face as stone-like as ever. Henry knew exactly where it was. He'd gone home and found it on a map. I'll be there, Saturday morning, 9 o'clock sharp. Wouldn't miss it for the world, he wanted to say, but thank you were the only words Henry could muster. If Mrs. Beatty knew how much this meant to him, she didn't let it show. There they are. She grabbed a book of matches and headed out back again with her lunch. Call me when you're done in here.